The Flyers' rebuild so far has been fairly underrated in terms of the bottom teams in the NHL. But with a new head coach and a ton of young up-and-coming talent, the Flyers look poised to make a big step forward in 2025-2026. This is my off-season deep dive on the 25-26 Philadelphia Flyers. Hello and welcome to number 29 on my NHL Power Rankings, the Philadelphia Flyers. And before we really get into it, this team is fairly low in terms of where I see them currently, but I do think that of the four teams after today that we've talked about, the Flyers certainly have the highest potential in terms of success this season in my mind. I also would put them ahead of a couple of the teams that we're going to talk about after them. So there's some teams that are kind of going into this year higher on my rankings, but the Flyers are definitely the team that I think is the biggest, is the best to be poised to take a step forward, and that's kind of where I see them. So just kind of a bit of context for what this is. The rankings are just where I'd have them currently at this moment in time, not necessarily a projection for how their season's going to go. So I just kind of wanted to state that here, because especially with the Flyers, this is a team that I think that I really like, and I think is poised for a pretty strong season here in 2025-26. Looking at their overview, this is where I have them right now, and this is basically the reason why they're where they're at. Offensively, they're 25th in my rankings. Defensively, they're 27th. Goaltending, 32nd. Special teams, 21st, and coaching culture, 22nd. We'll talk about coaching culture right away. But overall, it was a pretty quiet offseason for the Flyers. They really didn't do a lot of external things. Christian Dvorak was the big free agent name, and that was more of a, we need to get to the salary cap floor, than a Christian Dvorak's a great hockey player, let's bring him in. And the biggest concern here is clearly in net, right? 32nd in goal. Dan Vladar was the solution that they brought in for this season, and Samuel Erson's still there, who's been serviceable as a decent backup, but anything more than that has been overwhelming for him, basically. And obviously that wasn't the ideal goaltending situation for the Flyers a couple years ago, but this is where we're at now. The offense and defense has enough young pieces to develop that I actually think that both these ratings, both their offense and defense, will be maybe not considerably higher, but will both be higher than this at this time next year when we're doing this. I don't expect the Flyers offense to be 25th and their defense to be 27th. I expect those numbers to take a jump up. Goaltending is the bigger question, right? Unless they go make a move for somebody, I don't necessarily know if I see that number moving up. Special teams, very much similar to a lot of these teams, is just going to be how the young kids can develop. They just have a bit of a more mature core than some of the other teams we've talked about. They're a couple years further along in some cases. And coaching culture, which we will touch on right now. Daniel Brière's here as GM. He's done a fine job. Again, similar to some of the other GMs on this list, I need to see the full complete picture of this team, and I need to see them win before I can have him much higher than this. But I have him at a C+. I think he's done a fine job. I think his drafting has been pretty solid. I think his trades have more or less been fine. I think that the Jamie Drysdale trade has looked worse and worse as it's moved along, and I think the Trevor Zegras trade was fine. So, overall, I think he's done a good job. But the Drysdale trade is kind of the one weighing this down at the moment. Obviously, it was a weird situation because Cutter Gauthier didn't want to play there. The politics behind it are there, but at the end of the day, I don't think he necessarily maximized that asset in terms of value. But he's been fine. He's been a solid GM. I don't really have any complaints other than that, really. For Daniel Briere, it's just I need to see kind of the full picture come together here before I can make a full judgment on him more than a C+. The thing I want to talk about here really is Rick Tocchet, because I don't hate the hiring, right? I think Rick Tocchet elevates the floor of this team, and it's one of the reasons why I think that they're going to be better than 29th at the end of the season. But I also don't know if Rick Tocchet is the right coach for where this team is built for, right? Because Rick Tocchet is very much, in terms of like systems, he's fairly similar to what they had in John Tortorella in the fact that he's defensive first. He's going to be very much structurally. He's built very structured. He's very old school in that sense. Now Rick Tocchet's a lot more of a player's coach. Players seem to generally like him more. There's a lot of positive comments about him out of Vancouver when he was there. But this is also his fourth head coaching job now. So we kind of know what Rick Tocchet is, right? Like the product of what Rick Tocchet is what he is. And I think this was a hire that leans into what the Flyers like legacy is as a team in the NHL, where they're a like hard nose, defensive first, like rough and tumble kind of team. Whereas I think the roster doesn't really reflect that, right? Like you look around this Flyers roster, and we're gonna touch on it a bit, but they have a lot of really skilled players, right? And even like their more defensive players are fairly high caliber skill players, right? Like they're compared to what they, other players in those roles are. And I would have loved to see the Flyers take a swing on like a first time offensive minded head coach to just really, really lean into being this high flying, energetic, fast-paced team, and I don't know if Rick Tocchet is the guy to do that. So although I think he raises their floor, and I don't think he's a bad coach in any sense of the word, I don't think that he elevates their ceiling any more than where it was overall as a team. Like, even not necessarily just for this year, but in the next couple of years, I don't know if he can, because we saw like John Tortorella come in, and maybe the players first mentality that Tocchet has seemed to have in some cases, or at least more so than Tortorella, will help in that sense. But I don't want to see them stifle the offensive development of players like Michkov and all these other young players that they have in the name of like structure and tightness defensively. Although I do think that those things could help this team out in the defensive aspect, because a lot of their high end forwards are not very good defensively. So, it's weird because the hire covers up a lot of the mistakes that they had in terms of like how this roster is built, at least in the top end of it. But I also think that it limits the high end skill of those players. I mean, it's very like the concern I have is that this looks like what the Islanders look like in the like early days of Matt Barzal being the guy after Tavares left, where it's very much a defensive first team, and then you have this super high skilled, high end player like Matt Barzal who never really gets that full breakout. And I'm concerned that is what the Flyers might end up looking like. Now, the caveat to that is the Islanders won a bunch of games and went to 2 Eastern Conference Finals. So, like, I'm not saying that they're not going to win games, but I think that it does lower the ceiling a little bit. Whereas I think if the Islanders would have let players like Matt Barzal loose a little bit more, maybe they don't lose in back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe they get to one of those Cup Finals. So that's kind of my concern here. I don't hate the hire, but I don't love it either. And as for Rick Tocchet in general, I think B- is fair for what he is, obviously, as the Jack Adams in Vancouver. Some people might argue that he's higher than that, but I think, especially for the fit with the team, I don't love it. It's fine. Like it's good. He's a good coach. It's not like it's a very safe hire. But I would have liked to see a little bit more risk. And the teams that take more risks are generally the ones that seem to win more games in the aggregate. So we'll see. Obviously, it can blow up. There's cases where you hire a first-time head coach and they're awful. But I do think like Jay Woodcroft was the guy that I really wanted here in Philly. If you're going to go with somebody who's been a head coach already, like that felt like the guy that I really wanted to see them hire. And they didn't go that way, obviously. Neither did the Dallas Stars, to be fair. And that was kind of my other place that I wanted Jay Woodcroft to go. So, it is what it is. But I don't think it's a bad hire. But I have concerns overall about what this team could look like in terms of like a ceiling for the Flyers. So, we look at their numbers last year, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? Where this kind of moves my point more. Now, their special teams numbers were not good. 30th in power play percentage. Their underlying numbers on the power play were equally as bad, which is kind of surprising for the amount of young talent this team has, and part of my ranking for them is because their penalty kill was only 20th, and their underlying penalty kill numbers were actually pretty good. I think a lot of that is put to the goaltending that they had in terms of the percentages. And also, just to clarify, because I had a comment about this on my last video, the JFresh card that's on the I guess right of your screen from Talk Down Hockey is their power play and penalty kill is their true percentage in the league, whereas the chart from Evolving Hockey is more of their underlying numbers. So just to understand the context of those, because I had a question about that earlier, but again, their shorthanded numbers actually weren't bad. It was just that they were getting finished on a lot more than they probably should have been. But again, their goaltending really hasn't changed, so maybe that'll still be the case. Opposed to that, I mean, their expected goals numbers, according to the JFresh chart, has them more favorable than Evolving Hockey does. Evolving Hockey probably has them in the high teens, whereas JFresh has them in the top 10. I think it's probably closer to that 11-12 space. But again, the finishing for this team is 16th, right in the middle league average. I'd expect that to go up, especially with development and the addition of Trevor Zegras. I think that helps in terms of this team's offensive ability. But again, defensive head coach, how much creativity is Trevor Zegras going to be allowed to have, right? That's kind of the caveat to that. But again, this team was 16th in goals for and 8th in expected goals, at least in JFresh's model with John Tortorella. So I don't think Rick Tocchet's going to make them worse necessarily in those categories. But we jump into this offense, man, and I really like the outlook for this offense, right? And when you're quickly looking at my grades here, the big thing to kind of notice is especially the wingers being in the top 6, being pretty consistently across the board at a level offensively, and them all being pretty underwhelming defensively. And I really think that guys like Sean Couturier and Noah Cates, who I don't love as the 2C on this team, but that's besides the point, are going to have to carry a lot of that defensive load. And Couturier looked good in that role last year. He looked solid coming back from the injury. And Noah Cates, I just love Noah Cates. I think he's so underrated. And we're going to dive into those players more. But you look at just the talent here. I mean, Michkov and Zegras on the left side, and then Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett on the right. It's so much talent in terms of skill in that top 6 that I don't think that the Noah Cates thing at 2C is necessarily an issue, because there's just so much overwhelming offensive talent around him, at least compared to the other teams in this relative area of the NHL, that I don't think that the limitations in his game are going to hurt them, right? I think that him being a strong defensive presence on that line is actually going to be the most important part of his role. But then you go down the roster, right, and you have guys like Tyson Forster, who's just elite defensively, and then Garnet Hathaway is down there too, who had another phenomenal defensive season that nobody really talked about. That is going to help this team defensively in the bottom 6. Now, there's nobody. I think the other concern really with this team is that there's no real true secondary scorer in this bottom 6, right? You're hoping that Christian Dvorak and Bobby Brink can bring that, but that's an ask, right? And Nick Delorier and Anthony Ricard and Garnet Hathaway really aren't going to do that for you either. So I guess that's my concern, is just the defensive abilities of the top 6, and then the lack of offense in the bottom 6. And again, I don't think a coach like Rick Tocchet is going to help that, especially the offense in the bottom 6. The first player that I really want to talk about here is Matvei Michkov, and with good reason. I mean, he is so much fun as an offensive player when he was given that opportunity, and even under the John Tortorella suppressive offensive system, his underlying numbers still look really good, right? If you're watching on YouTube right now, his expected goals were in the top percentile of the NHL. His Rapham goals for were also really good. Obviously defensively he wasn't, but I think everybody pre-draft knew that Matvei Michkov's strength was not his defensive game. I don't want to see a player like this not be given the opportunity to be let loose. And we really saw, like, after Tortorella left, that Michkov really took off, and he had some crazy good offensive output the second Tortorella left. So that's why I really wanted to see, because we saw like what could happen in a non-super structured defensive system. We saw what he could become, and I really hope that that's not what Rick Tocchet becomes here. And I'm going to keep harping on that because there's a couple other players like that, but especially Matvei Michkov is such a special offensive player, and he really showed that like over in Russia, and he showed that in flashes last year, like especially after Tortorella left, what he could be offensively for this team. And I really hope that they continue to let him loose, right? If you're going to run a defensive structure, do it with the bottom six and do it where you have to, but let Michkov go. Take the handcuffs off and just let him be himself. Let him be the best version of himself that he can be, because at his best, he is an extremely, extremely offensive, dynamic offensive creator, and that's just what I want to see. Like, that is where this team is going to be at its best. So just if Tocchet can balance that and can play his defensive game and help this team grow defensively, but also continue to let the skill players on this team loose, then Philadelphia is going to be super dangerous. If he doesn't do that, their floor is going to certainly get raised, but I don't know how high the ceiling is if those players are still kind of handcuffed and not allowed to really take chances and be who they're supposed to be. Another player that's super important in this team is Sean Couturier, and obviously, like, post-injury, his numbers really have fallen off a little bit. His defense is still pretty solid, but he's not as much of an elite two-way player as he used to be. Now he's probably like better as a 2C, and unfortunately his cap hit is so high that he's not going to generate interest as a 2C, and that's unfortunate because the Flyers could easily move him, and he'd be, I think, obviously like Rossi and McTavish are still on the market at the time of this video, but if Sean Couturier is on a shorter contract or a lower cap hit, Sean Couturier might be the most enticing second line center in the NHL for teams looking for that kind of player. And unfortunately, his cap hit is too high and his contract's too long, and nobody's really gonna scoop him up at this point, barring a substantial retention or just an insanely small package coming back for the Flyers. And I don't really think the Flyers are going to do that because they'd rather just have him here to help develop the team. There's no sense in moving him out. They don't need the cap relief. So that's kind of the situation here. He's still serviceable. I think he'll be helpful, especially with Konechny and Michkov, because he'll be able to mitigate a lot of those defensive lapses, right? Like he's not going to be asked to be the offensive driver on that line. In fact, he might be like the fourth most important offensive player behind whatever primary defenseman's on the ice. And I think that's good, right? Like you don't need Sean Couturier to be a primary offensive driver because you have two of them on his line already. He's just there to kind of help balance out the poor defensive play on the rest of the team. And I think that's fine, right? That's a good spot for him. And that's all they really need from him this season. And if he can do that, put up like 55 points, I think that's a pretty solid season for Sean Couturier at this point. Travis Konechny is the other guy on that line, and Konechny is such an interesting player because his defensive numbers aren't very good, and going into his 28th season, I don't know if that's going to change at this point. But again, you have somebody here who's a very, very exciting offensive creator, right? This is somebody who drives play really well with the puck. He's able to create space for his teammates, and especially with Michkov, if you let these guys loose and you let them fully lean into the offensive part of their game, that can be an extremely dynamic combination. We saw spurts of that last season. I'm concerned. Like, I mean, look at his first assist percentage. It's in the 95th percentile. Like, that's insane. It's crazy. And you have somebody like Michkov who is just an elite creator himself. Like, the combination of those two is extremely deadly. And I keep saying it, I've said it a bunch, but I really hope these guys are allowed to cook, because if Philly's allowed to cook, go for it, right? Like we saw it in Montreal. Montreal is kind of the example to this, where Martin St. Louis just kind of let the reins off, especially last year, and that team was really able to just lean into like being overwhelming offensively, and their defensive metrics were not good, but they made the playoffs with it. And that overall, right, like once you get that, once you kind of show players that they can make mistakes and it's okay, and they're gonna win those battles more than they're gonna lose them even with the mistakes, then you can start implementing the defensive structure afterwards, right? But stifling them beforehand really kind of enforces the idea that making mistakes is bad. And I don't think, especially when you have like creative offensive players, telling them that making mistakes is bad is just going to stifle their development, and it's really going to hurt their overall product. And I think that's what kind of happened with Matt Barzal. But Travis Konecny is another guy that just like, he's not built to play in a defensive structured system. He's built to play in a high-paced, energetic, offensive-first system, and you don't necessarily have to run the full team like that, but when they're out there, you kind of just have to be okay with defensive lapses, because the offense is going to overwhelm that anyway. And one of the best ways to play defense is to just never give the other team the puck and consistently create offense. And I think that this top line could do that exceptionally well if given the proper opportunity to do so. So that's kind of my hope for where the Flyers are here with this top line. The second line is fairly similar, and Trevor Zegras is the main player I want to talk about here, and I have his microstat card up on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube at NBA Hockey on YouTube, go watch the videos. They're there. It's great. I love responding to the comments and seeing the different opinions we've had. Side note, by the way, like I love seeing all these people that aren't traditionally followers of me coming to watch like the video on their team and then like talking about it. Like I think that's great. For context, because I know I get this comment a bunch, like I've watched at least like 25 games for each of these teams throughout the season. And then while I was doing my rankings, as you saw on the main lineup screen, I went back and watched some film on those individual players that like I might have not watched as much, right? Like as like Bobby Brink, I wasn't really paying attention to as much like game to game. So I'd go back and watch like some Bobby Brink tape, for instance. That was one of the players for the Flyers that I went back and watched some film on. One player I didn't really have to watch a bunch of film on because I really like him. I don't think that he's super talented and just has been injured the last couple of years, is Trevor Zegras, whose stats are on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. And his like true underlying numbers haven't been great. Part of that's because the Ducks weren't very good and because he was injured. But his micro stats when he's been playing are very good. Like his offensive production, right, his creation has been really good. And his defensive like retrievals and exits are actually like really strong, right? Especially for a winger. Now his defensive like ability to stop rushes may not be where you'd want it, but I do think that his retrieval ability in the defensive zone is actually super underrated and is a part of his game that I really like, and clearly the numbers like it too, because he's one of the best in the league at some of those aspects of his game. So I again, like if he's healthy and he's able to play at a moderately high level, kind of back to where he was a couple years ago, Trevor Zegras is going to be a super fun addition to this team. And I think Rick Tocchet's going to like him maybe a lot more than he likes Michkov because of the fact that he is like getting those defensive retrievals and helping out in the defensive zone as much as he can. Maybe not in the shot suppression side of it, but definitely in the getting the puck back side of it, which is just as important. So I think that he could be in for a pretty big season, and I was really disappointed to not see him with Joel Quenneville actually, because I thought that would be a good pairing. Clearly the Ducks did not, and here we are. So I'm excited to watch Trevor Zegras this year. I think he's a super interesting part of this team. Owen Tippett is more or less in the same kind of conversation. I think Owen Tippett has really come along, especially last year and the year before. Like since becoming a Flyer, he's been super underrated second line winger, and I think that's kind of probably where he caps out, is as a really productive second line winger. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like his defensive numbers are actually pretty solid. In terms of what the rest of this the winger core in the top six looks like. And his again ability to create offense is really good. Like it's very underrated and a key part of his game. overall, like the kind of the moral of the story of this top six is just their ability to create their own offense is pretty big across the board, right? Like all the wingers on this team can do it. I think that Brink and Noah Cates and Sean Couturier can do it as well, just to a lesser extent. But I really think that there's potential for this top six to come out of this year as one of the better offensive top sixes in the league. Like I genuinely think that is a possibility if everything comes together and development happens and they're able to generate the offense. And if that is the case, then the Flyers can be a really fun team this season, and that's why I'm so excited about this roster. Like, I'm actually fairly positive about the players on this roster because I think that the potential here is really, really good. I'm just concerned about the system they're going to run, and we'll find that out, like, even in preseason, right? Watch a couple of the Flyers games in preseason, we'll kind of see how they're structurally playing and what kind of situations they're putting their players in. But the potential here is really exciting, and as a Flyers fan, I think that you can get pretty excited about what this offense is going to look like. One of the final pieces on is Noah Cates and his two-way ability hasn't been talked about enough, right? Like, now, ideally, Noah Cates is your third-line center, right? Ideally, like, Couturier is the 2C and Cates is your 3C, and then you have, like, a super high-end 1C, right? Maybe this is a team that makes a move for, like, Rossi or McTavish. They're not really talked about in either of those players, but that would be fun, right? Like, I think getting McTavish and Zegras together again would be kind of fun. I'm just saying. But Noah Cates is super underrated defensively. His offensive numbers really took a big step in 23-24, where he went from being just a super high-end defensive player to just a really good two-way player, and his defensive numbers dropped a little bit because of that, but I'm not really concerned about that, right? I'd rather him be this really good two-way player and be, high efficiency on both ends, especially for his age. Like, this is somebody who, if he keeps developing the way he is now, he's going into his 26th season, so there's not a ton of room for him to take a massive step forward. But do I think he can become a 2C? Yeah, I mean, he's going to be given that role this year. Christian Dvorak's there more as a safety net, hopefully. And they kind of let Noah Cates take that second-line role more prominently. And if that happens, like, I definitely think that he could grow into it. I mean, his competition level is already in the top, like, almost 30%. So he's used to playing against pretty solid competition. He's not getting sheltered a ton in the minutes that he's playing. So I'm just, like, he's somebody I'm super excited to see play here. And I think giving him Zegras and Tippett sounds like a fun time. Like, that seems like there's a ton of potential there. I think that his creation isn't as high as the other players in this top six, but it doesn't really have to be because he'll be able to be kind of that defensive help to those lines in the same way that Couturier is going to be. But I'm so excited about Noah Cates. I love Noah Cates. So it's just, like, everybody in this top six, I think I'm pretty high on as players, and that's exciting overall. Like, I think that's a good place to be if you're the Philadelphia Flyers top six. The bottom six, I'm less excited about, right? Christian Dvorak, pretty much his whole career. Obviously, he was traded for the first round pick in the Jesperi Kotkaniemi situation. I think that he was a little overrated at that point, trying to become the 2C in Montreal, and then he never materialized into that, and the Flyers paid him a bunch of money because they needed a stable center behind Noah Cates, and they had to get to this cap floor. So, hey, 1-year deal for Christian Dvorak. The money doesn't really bother me because of that. But you're not really going to get a ton of dynamic play out of Christian Dvorak. He's fine defensively. He's pretty underwhelming offensively. And he's just kind of okay. And I think that as a safety net for Noah Cates, it's fine because Christian Dvorak can come in and play in that top six if you need him to, in some nights. But he's not going to move the needle for this team very much. And I was a little... It was a little upsetting that this was like the big free agency move that they made. Obviously, they went and got Trevor Zegras as well, but the acquisition cost on Zegras was fairly low compared to the potential there. So this kind of felt like their other major move this summer, and it's pretty underwhelming for what this team needed. I would have liked maybe filling out the another one of the fourth line slots. I think there's two pretty volatile fourth line slots on the team right now that could have been potentially filled, and Christian Dvorak being the only real outside addition to this offense aside from Zegras was a little underwhelming to me, but he's fine. That's it. He's pretty mediocre third line center. For a team that's trying to take a step forward, it felt like a little bit of a underwhelming move, and I don't think that's an unfair assessment of what Christian Dvorak could be. He's okay. He'll be fine as your 3C. He's not going to move the needle. He's not going to carry that line, but he'll be serviceable. And maybe that's all they wanted, and they needed to burn salary, and they did that. So I guess that's fine. Bobby Brink is, again, just another player I'm excited about. I think that his offensive underlying numbers aren't great, but there's some things that I like here, right? I think the assist opportunities that he's creating are good. I think that he can create. He's a pretty underrated creator in that sense. His exits are pretty good. His passing is pretty good. I mean, he's in the top 30 percentile in high danger passes. His passes leading to offensive scoring chances are in the top 15-ish%, and so are his primary assists. So he's somebody that can create those opportunities, trans contributions. He's in the 72nd percentile. So his ability to create is really exciting. I just think that if you're gonna have a player like this, you need somebody who's gonna be able to finish those chances. And if that's what they brought in Christian Dvorak to do, they're gonna be very disappointed with that. But there's potential here, especially like on a power play, right? Like I think if you give now his power play outlook last year wasn't very good, but I think you keep giving him those opportunities and you see what can happen, because I think his passing ability is there, and if you can get him guys who can finish those plays, then Bobby Brink could be a really useful kind of middle six to bottom six, like secondary scoring creator. And a lot of teams need those, right? Like you look at the Florida Panthers this year, right? Their third line was very good at being annoying, but their third line is also really good at creating their own offense. And it's what made Brad Marchand look phenomenal in that role, right? And I think Bobby Brink could be a big piece of creating a very solid third line like that. So I'm excited in that sense. I don't know how much hope I have for that happening this season necessarily, but I think there's something here, right? Like there's shell of a really strong bottom six here, led by Bobby Brink being kind of the driving force of that. Jumping into this blue line now, it's solid, right? I think there's potential here, like Seeler and Sanheim. Travis Sanheim, I really like Travis Sanheim, so he's kind of the main guy on this blue line, and that's totally fine. Nick Seeler as your number two is okay. The thing that I'm really excited about is the progression of Cam York, who we will talk about in a minute. But he took a pretty big step forward last year, and if he can do that again, then all of a sudden you have your top three being Sanheim, Seeler, and Cam York. I think is a very solid foundation for this blue line. The other big question on this is Jamie Drysdale, right? Like Jamie Drysdale has not found the immense success in the NHL that some people thought he was going to. And if he can figure that out, maybe Rick Tocchet can be the one to bring that out of him, because Quinn Hughes really liked playing under Rick Tocchet. So Jamie Drysdale might be able to get something out of Jamie that nobody else has been able to yet. And if that's the case, then all of a sudden this top four looks exceptionally good. And then you have, Igor Zamula under that, who's a very strong defensive third line defenseman, and then Rasmus Ristolainen, who actually had a pretty underrated defensive season last year. As much as I don't like Rasmus Ristolainen, I got to give him credit. Like he had a solid defensive season in those limited roles on a third pair. And I think if you have that really strong defensive shutdown pair, along with a top four that can be more dynamic and offensive created, the outlook of that is again very solid. Like I think that's a good, really strong foundation for this Flyers team. And of course it starts with Travis Sanheim, right? And you'll notice a pattern here with a lot of these players, especially in the higher part of this lineup, right? Like Trevor Zegras, Matvei Michkov, Travis Konecny, Owen Tippett to a lesser extent, but it's energy offensive type players who have mediocre to bad defensive numbers. Travis Sanheim follows that mold again, and that's what I mean by like this team not feeling like a Rick Tocchet team, because they don't have this like super structured defensive players that are going to fit into that, right? They have these high energy, like we're going to create a bunch of chances offensive players. So we'll see how that meshes, right? Like I'm intrigued. But again, like Travis Sanheim, very good shot creator, very good chance creator. For this team, his zone exits he's one of the best zone exit defensemen in the league, and that could really like help start offense on this team, especially with guys like Trevor Zegras, who are very good in transition. I'm really excited to see how that meshes with a Travis Sanheim, who is very good at creating, chance opportunities. He's in the 99th percentile in chance assists among defensemen. And his chance contributions are in the 95th percentile, right? Like those are all very good things. And the fact that his exit success rate is in the 96th percentile and his retrieval success rate is in the 95th percentile means that essentially if he goes into the corner to get a puck in a 50-50 battle, the odds are that he's not only winning that battle, but he's also getting out of the zone. And that is so valuable for this team, right? Like having that ability is so important to a team like the Philadelphia Flyers, who have, again, like a lot of defensive deficiencies, but if you can get guys who can win those battles and get the puck out, those problems aren't really there, right? And Trevor Zegras is kind of in the same boat, where his shot suppression isn't necessarily as high as you'd like it to be, but if you can get the puck out in a one-and-done kind of puck battle, then you don't really have to worry about the shot suppression because the puck's not in a position to get shot on your own net. So, yeah, I love Travis Sanheim. I think he's really underrated. And hopefully he can continue to break out as like a really, really good offensive defenseman on this roster. Nick Seeler, on the other end, is his offensive numbers aren't quite there, but his defensive numbers are. So he's a good counterfold to what Sanheim is, right? Like it's very much the Mark Methot to Erik Karlsson, although it might be a bad example because neither of those players are on that level of what Methot and Karlsson were at that point in their respective roles. But the point is that like he's more of the defensive, steady defenseman, and I think it's a good counterbalance for what Sanheim is, and it makes Sanheim look even better, right? Like Travis Sanheim made Team Canada this year, and he'll likely be on the roster for the Olympics. I'm assuming. I don't foresee a world where he isn't on that roster, but we'll see. But Nick Seeler helps him look better in the defensive area because that's what a good defensive defenseman is supposed to do. And so I think that the pairing there is really good, and it allows the really young guys, or like Cam York and Jamie Drysdale, to really kind of be open and play around. But I do think that we're going to see some movement in this blue line. I also don't think those pairings are necessarily set in stone. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all unfolds for the Flyers blue line.